Hey everyone, welcome to the E2 Effective Elders podcast. Visit us at e2elders.org and please share this good word with others.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to our E2 podcast for the month of November 2025. And on this podcast recording, we're dressed warmly because we got our first snow already here in Indiana. And whenever that happens, I'm rejoicing in that because I like the changing the season. So we want to welcome Jeff Faull. Jeff, how are you doing this morning?
Doing good, man. Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, Jeff is a friend of many, many years. He's a part of the E2 leadership team. He's on our board of directors and he's also on our coaching bench. He's done a lot of speaking on behalf of E2. And probably by the end of this podcast, we might even make mention of more of Jeff's engagement with us at E2. So, hey, this month, our topic, our leadership skill that we are making mention of is that of succession. And succession is that necessary part of life that's rooted in the Word of God. For example, we see Elijah handing the baton of leadership off to Elisha. Moses did with Joshua. It's so present. Paul to Timothy, to Titus, to others. And so what we're going to do is have a conversation with Jeff, and it's going to zero in on this season of life that we call succession. But Jeff, some people might not know your story a little bit. So why don't you acquaint yourself with people who may be watching and or listening that they could get acquainted with you?
Sure. I am right in the middle of succession, so I'm not some kind of succession expert that can say, hey, this is all in our rearview mirror. We are right in the thick of it right now and have been for some time. In case you don't know me or my background, I've been associated with the church that I preach at now for 42 years. I had an internship here 42 years ago. And 5 years after that, I started as the senior minister. So I've been the senior minister here for 37 years. In fact, I've started my 38th year here at Mount Gilead. So there's a long history with the church here. It's a wonderful church, wonderful elders, wonderful people. I couldn't have asked for God to give me a better church than what He's given me. And in His grace, not only have I had that long-term durable ministry, but in these last 3 years during succession planning, we have been blessed with unbelievable growth and momentum, more than we've ever had in the whole time that I've been privileged to serve here. We've averaged several hundred baptisms a year, and we're on pace this year, in this my last full year of ministry, to hit 300 baptisms, and we're just blown away by what God has allowed us to experience. And I received a little bit of coaching about succession from Gary and watched him go through succession. One of the things he said to me at the beginning of this was, succession is not your time to take the foot off the gas, but to put your foot on the gas and to move forward. And God in His grace has allowed us to do that here. And it's an incredibly exciting time to hand the reins over to my successor. And I'll be sharing a little bit more about that as our conversation continues.
Yeah. Well, how did you and the leadership team, the elders, how did you prepare for this season?
Well, we did several things. We first started talking about this in 2019 and then got more serious in 2020 and 2021. And so much so, Gary, that you'll remember we started having conversations with E2 about it. We've been an E2 partner church for many years. And you came to talk to us about this very subject, made some recommendations to us. And one of the things you suggested that we do is to put together a plan, and that we could put that plan in writing and then put it on the shelf till we decided it was time to press play. And so we started working on that back in 21 and 22, and then got very serious about it in 2023. We made things known to the congregation. So this has been a extended process in a good way.
Yeah. And Uh, so you and the leadership team have really experienced that this is a journey. It's not an event. And you leaned into the reality that you have to prepare. Did you have to convince anybody else in your leadership culture that we had to approach succession this way?
No, I think they were grateful to have some kind of a plan for the future, even though they knew it wasn't quite time yet.
Mhm,
And one of the things I did, Gary, was I have a son that lives out in Massachusetts. He's a preacher out there, and
mhm,
a family in his church had a place on the Cape,
mhm,
and they let me have it for about 3 days.
mhm,
And I went there and I spent 3 days fasting and
mhm,
praying and thinking and reading.
mhm,
I looked at every transition I could think of in the Bible. You mentioned a couple of those transitions.
mhm,
Um, I looked at decision making processes in the Bible,
mhm,
even those that you might not look at normally. Like I looked at how Gideon laid out a fleece and those kinds of things. But I remember even stumbling across in the opening chapters of Acts that when they were praying to replace Judas, which I don't like to make any comparison there with transition, but when they were praying to replace
uh,
Judas, they prayed, Lord, you know
yeah.
the man
Mhm,
that is supposed to
mhm,
take this spot.
yep.
And I think that does transfer into the transition kind of thinking. And so I spent those 3 days, I would think and pray, and then I'd get up and go walk a mile, and then I would think and pray and walk a mile,
Mhm,
and I spent those 3 days just seeking God. I journaled everything, that I wrote down. I still have that transition journal, which is something that's been helpful to me this whole time, to
mhm,
keep a journal of this entire,
mhm,
process to remind me what God has already done and to give me courage that, he's still working right now in this whole process. And
mhm,
as this is coming to fruition now, and we have my successor identified and on staff here, he's already leading. Um, he led our staff meeting this morning. To look back at that journal is very helpful to
yeah.
know how we have sought God. I've never prayed, Gary, I've never prayed harder for anything in my life than
Mhm,
I've prayed for the church and for a successor.
right.
I prayed daily for him and his wife and children by name and for the church. And God has just given me great confidence in that whole
Praise be to
process.
God. So how do you feel then in this moment? I can remember sharing with you, and I've shared this with many other ministers that E2 is walking with through succession. And I've said, this is going to be an emotional season. You're going to feel many different emotions. It's going to be like a roller coaster. So why don't you talk about that element, please?
So, if you just nail me down on this, the dominant predominant feelings are that I'm incredibly grateful and confident right now,
Mhm, mhm,
um, knowing that this is the right man, and having a good relationship with him has just done wonders for that.
mhm,
But I would also have to admit that there's some strange feelings. There's even a few feelings of trepidation
mhm,
once in a while.
mhm,
And that I think comes from several places.
mhm,
One is I've always thought that my identity wasn't tied to what I do.
yeah.
And the closer I get to the end of this process, and I'll be finishing up in April,
Mhm,
uh, and the closer I get to that reality and I watch this other
mhm,
man lead so well, the more I think, well, maybe this was my identity is a little bit more wrapped up in this than I thought it was. And I watch the transfer taking place. Maybe a
mhm,
conversation in the lobby, and I can tell in the conversation that people are looking to him as
yeah.
the leader now because it's been announced and he does so well. He presents himself so well. He endears himself to people, and that's what I want. But it's
Mhm,
also a strange feeling to be kind of in an extended baton handoff
mhm,
at this time. And so, just like you think about things like, man, right now I have a platform. There's 1,000 people watching online each week. And as I continue in ministry, because I'm not retiring
mhm,
and have a future with you and with E2, as I continue in ministry, the platform's going to be different.
mhm,
Um, I don't have the auditorium and all the technological stuff that's available to me right now. And so the thoughts like that run through your mind, financial thoughts, thoughts about the future run through your mind. But
Absolutely.
predominantly, I'm just grateful and confident to where God has led and how miraculously He's met our needs during this time.
So one thing I want to just really accentuate there before we go on to the next question is every one of us, it doesn't matter if our vocation is ministry or we work in a factory or we're a school teacher, a police officer, a construction worker, every one of us experiences the Ecclesiastes chapter 3. There is a time to be born, a time to die. There's a time to rejoice. There's a time to weep. The seasons of life. And how well we navigate those seasons. And just like in a game of football, we're in the fourth quarter. And a fourth quarter of a football game, players are tired and bruised and sweaty, and it's emotional. They might be emotional because the score up there on the screen is a victory, or it might be a loss. In this season of life, there are emotions, and how we navigate those emotions are tied directly to how well we are walking with.
Yeah.
If we're not walking well with Jesus, we're not going to navigate this season of life well. And particularly for we as preachers, the bride of Christ is what matters more than us. And so we have to walk well with Jesus in this season if we're going to hand off the baton well in this season that we call succession. So very important, our walk with the Lord.
Well, Gary, there's two books that come to mind that have been influential for me during this time. And one is your book, Leadership, which you wrote during your succession time. And that was very helpful to me. But also another book you recommended, and it's called Strength to Strength.
Mhm.
And if I remember correctly, Arthur Brooks is
Yep,
the
Dr.
author.
Arthur Brooks. Yep.
And it's more of a secular book, but it was very helpful as well. And so I would commend that to our listeners.
And Dr. Arthur Brooks, a sociologist, he's on the faculty of the graduate school at Harvard. He's a believer. And he, from his research, said that the most productive season of life, decade of life, is that of our 70s. And second to it, that of our 80s. And again, the book unpacks with what's going on in our interior world. If we're going to experience that in our 70s and then again in our 80s. Very important, because how we think determines how we live, but also how we lead. How I think determines how I lead. How'd you find your successor?
Well, we wanted to avoid, if possible, going through sort of the headhunter type of approach. And so we created a website, succession, not a website, but a succession section of our church website. We started networking. We just put the word out there. One of the things we did was we let our congregation know early we were going through this process. They had time to get used to it. And ultimately, I have a son-in-law who preaches in Louisville, and he's taking his doctorate at Wheaton. And he ran into a fellow student there that he became friends with and thought highly of, and said, "You need to talk to my father-in-law." And so we had a conversation, and that was the beginning of the relationship that we have together, and the decision for him to come and be on staff here. And it couldn't have worked out better.
Yeah, praise be to God. And I know the Mount Gilead Church really well, and prayer and fasting was a part of your search process,
Yeah.
right?
As I said before, I've never prayed as hard for anything as I've prayed for this. And the elders and staff agreed to do the same thing
There you go.
as we planned for this. And so this whole thing has been bathed in prayer for several years now. And I put together a profile of what we were looking for, not a job description, but a profile of the kind of person that we
Yeah.
wanted.
Mhm.
And we wanted him to be that kind of a man, a lover of God,
Mhm.
a man who lived in the pastoral epistles, a
Mhm.
man who believed in fasting and prayer, a man who was um, confidently inadequate.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
we really highlighted that character issues as we sought
Mhm.
a leader, and I believe that with all my heart that God directed him to us.
Yeah. And I want everyone to understand this is one of the most important elements of finding a successor. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 9, right towards the end of the chapter, he says, "Pray to the Lord of the harvest to send forth workers." Well, Mount Gilead needed a worker to sit in that lead chair. Indian Creek Christian Church needed a worker to sit in our lead chair. And I can remember when we were looking for my successor, the elders, we said to the entire congregation, "Would you join us, please, on the first day of every month, praying and fasting before the Lord of the harvest to send forth his worker to this place?" And it was a very declarative journey that we made to our congregation, humbling ourselves and begging, pleading with them to pray for us and with us in this regard. So we cannot overestimate the power of prayer in finding a successor. It's an absolute essential part of this journey. So just a couple more questions, Jeff. What will make this handoff of the baton uh, work? What's going to put the success in succession?
Well, I think the biggest issue, the biggest thing that needs to happen is humility.
Hmm.
God is opposed to the proud, but he gives
Hmm.
grace to the humble. And that word opposed, it means he actively sets himself against people who are proud.
Right.
When we're proud, we pick a fight with God.
Yep.
And he gives grace to the humble. So when we're not humble, we avoid an avenue of grace. And I need every avenue of grace I can get.
Mhm.
There's another passage in the Old Testament that says, only by pride comes contention. It
Yeah.
means wherever there's conflict, somebody's proud. And so I call it controlling your alter ego, ALTAR.
Uh-huh.
That when human egos get out of the way, that makes room for God to work. And
Mm.
so both Harrison, my successor, and myself have really concentrated on that. And I remember something that you told me several years back, the prayer that you pray that was very
Mhm.
important to you. He must increase, I must decrease. And of course, we know that was John the Baptist
Mhm.
speaking about Jesus. And
Mhm.
so Harrison and I both want to pray that prayer
Mhm.
about Jesus.
Right.
He has to increase, we have to decrease. But I want to pray that prayer also about Harrison, that
Mhm.
my role and my influence and my leadership decreases and his
Mhm.
increases.
Yeah.
And there was a verse of scripture that Harrison kind of brought to the table, and I've watched him practice it. He says, "Man, I want to outdo you in love," and so we're just trying to outdo each other in love and deference, and it's working beautifully. I can honestly say, even though he's only been with us for a few months, that I love this guy,
Yeah.
and I believe that we will be very good friends in the future. And he's
Mhm.
already given me his blessing to be a part of this congregation after we go away for a period of time. And I sat in church Sunday while he did the welcome and watched him lead and thought, man, I can easily and proudly say that's my preacher.
Yeah.
And I know you're the same way with Dan.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I think humility is just a big deal. The other thing is alignment,
Mhm.
that we need to be aligned missionally.
Mhm.
We need to be aligned theologically,
Mhm.
and we need to be aligned relationally.
Mhm.
And so the time that we're spending together now, as I sort of hand over relational capital, sometimes I feel like he doesn't even need what I have to offer, but he's very gracious. The time we spend together right now is spent on alignment. How do we get in to perfect alignment so that this is seamless? Uh,
Yeah.
as we move forward.
When you mention humility as an essential part of putting success in succession, I would encourage people who are watching or listening, just research on the internet the Litany of Humility. It is a prayer that is centuries old. And what Jeff is referring to, I've actually taken that prayer, printed it, laminated it, and it's in my morning prayer journal. And there are lines in that I have prayed over and again, that Jesus, give me the grace that I would want to, my successor, that I would want Dan to be chosen and I to be set aside. There are lines that are so powerful in that prayer that, again, in the Holy Spirit's indwelling, He enables us to be in a powerfully healthy place so that we do this season of life in a most God-honoring way. So the Litany of Humility, it's a great prayer for sure.
Well, Gary, there's the evangelist in the Bible named Philip.
Mm-hmm.
And he had daughters who were prophetesses. He was involved in miraculous activity. He was involved in a big revival. And the Spirit of God told him to go to a desert road. And that's where he talked to the Ethiopian eunuch. And Agabus got to give the prophecy about Paul, not Philip's daughters. Philip just seemed to be this guy that said, plug me in wherever you need me. It's not about me. It's about you, and it's about the gospel. And I think if both parties in a transition take that kind of an attitude, it'll put the success in succession.
For sure. Yeah.
It's a big deal.
We're wrapping up here. If there's anything that you would change to do differently when it came to this succession journey on which you've been, can you highlight something that you would do differently?
Yeah, I would have shared the pulpit more sooner. And so we have another guy on staff here. His name's Justin White. He's incredible. He's a great preacher. And I remember somebody coming up to me out in the lobby, and I didn't have the microphone on, the countryman, and they said, "Is Justin preaching today?" And then they said, "Is Justin preaching today?" And that was a moment of realization for me. It didn't bother me at all. It made me happy because it made me realize, hey, there are people that these people are going to be entirely satisfied with, in fact, more excited about than they are about you. And so we started having Justin preach a lot, and I started having some of the other guys preach a lot. And right now, Gary, I'm preaching once a month, twice at the most. And our people are so accustomed to that now.
Yeah.
And it's been going on for several years now, and we've just put Harrison into the rotation. And I think that has really prepared our people, because they're not, oh, where's Jeff? It's not even an issue now.
Yeah. What Jeff is referring to is an important part of, again, this journey of succession. And I articulate that in the book that Jeff has highlighted called Leadership. And on the cover of Leadership, there is a decrescendo sign in ministry or in music, and a crescendo. So decrescendo, music gets softer, crescendo, music gets louder. And it's an image, it's a metaphor that when we are getting ready to hand off the baton, our leadership authority has to lessen while we give increasing authority to our successor. And similarly, our voice is heard less often while our successor is heard more often from the front of the church. It's a strategy, and it's not something that is done instantaneously. It's a journey. And we want to remember, this is not about us. This is about a people of God. And there are going to be people grieving Jeff's departure. They will actually grieve. There will be an emotional brokenness because Jeff has been their preacher, their minister, their pastor he's now in his 38th year. That is relational investment, and people are going to grieve. They're going to weep on April the 29th of 2026. And so we want to be cognizant of that and do all that we can to make sure that we honor God with this succession, this transition. The one other thing that I did want to make mention of, before we bring this to a close is the fact that we have to communicate and communicate and communicate openly and frequently with people. And what Jeff was talking about a moment ago about identity, that's a great time for us to be making disciples who make disciples who make disciples, that our identity is in Christ, not in necessarily what we're doing that Jesus has enabled us to do. And so, for example, Jeff said he's not retiring. I hope you heard that. He said, I am not retiring. What Jeff is doing, he is retooling. And he has an identity as a servant of Jesus that carries with him on Monday morning, April the 20th of 2026. He's a servant of Jesus. He's just getting in a different seat on the Jesus bus, that's all. And for our joy and benefit here at E2, after Jeff hands the baton off on that Sunday in April, he and his beloved wife, they're going to do some traveling. They're going to take a deep breath. They're going to get some rest, make some great memories. And we get to welcome Jeff to our E2 team full time. I think you're going to be here on July the 5th at 8 a.m., right?
I think so. Or is it the 6th? It's whatever the first day in the office after the 4th of July, whatever that day is.
So when we as men and women of God realize, if I have the breath of life, boy, I get the privilege of serving King Jesus for another day. That's how we need to think.
Can I say one more thing, Gary?
Yeah.
Mount Gilead's been around since 1835. Andrew Jackson was president when the church began. So our coffee place in the lobby, 1830 cafe, 1835. So I've been privileged to steward 38 years of that, and it's not mine. It belongs to Jesus. And so if I had one thing to do over again, starting this process, I think I would say I needed to trust God more than I did. And also the goodness of my elders and people, because the kindness that they've showed to me and will continue to show to me as they help me financially in this transition too, just incredible to see what God's people will do. So I would say, if you're in the middle of this, trust God even more.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, thank you very much. You've given great wisdom, pearls of wisdom to people who will have ears with which to hear. And if anybody's got a question about transition, I'm sure that Jeff would be happy to answer those for you. And Jeff, what, do you mind sharing your email address?
Faull, JFAULL, at mgchurch.org.
Yeah, great.
So at least that's what it is right now.
Yeah. We'll get you one here at E2 for sure.
All right.
And in the meantime, too, just email me, Gary at e2elders.org. If you've got a question on succession, we're working right now with several churches that are in this journey, this process. And it's a privilege to have that tool in our tool belt to make that happen. And if you're interested in the book, Leadership, tell you what you do. If you're listening to this, you just contact us and we'll give you a buy one, get one. Because this book really can be something that begins the thinking process. How do we approach this necessary season of life? And we do it in a God-honoring way. All right. Well, Jeff, thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you, Gary.